The morning was calm and fresh, the kind of morning when the air was cool and the sky was painted in soft shades of blue and gold. The ranch lake stretched wide and still, its surface like glass reflecting the rising sun. A man stood on the wooden dock with a cup of coffee in his hand. His boat tied neatly with thick rope, the gentle rocking of the water making a soft rhythm that calmed the mind. This was his favorite time of day, when the world seemed asleep, when only the birds called across. The water and the breeze whispered through the trees. He loved the silence. He loved the peace. But peace rarely lasted long in a neighborhood run by an HOA. And today the silence was shattered in a way that none of the neighbors would forget. It began with a faint hum in the distance, the low growl of engines cutting through the morning quiet. The man turned his head slightly, his calm eyes narrowing as flashing red and blue lights reflected against the windows of his house. 2 police cars rolled down the gravel road leading to his ranch lake, their sirens silent but their lights spinning bright. Tires crushed stones under their weight as they pulled up near the dock. Doors opened with sharp clicks and 2 officers stepped out, their belts heavy with radios and handcuffs, their faces stiff with official seriousness, and behind them came another group, not in uniform but carrying an even heavier air of self-importance, HOA members led by Karen, her chin high, her eyes burning with triumph as if she had already won a war. She pointed toward the dock with an accusing finger, her voice shrill as it cut through the air. There it is. That boat does not belong here. It is against our rules. Remove it at once. The neighbors, curious about the flashing lights, hurried out of their houses, some clutching coffee cups, others still in robes. They gathered along the path, whispering, their eyes wide in disbelief that police had been called over a boat tied at a quiet ranch lake. Children peeked from behind their parents, confused and excited by the drama unfolding before them. The man did not flinch, he did not rush, he did not even set his coffee down. He simply stood on the dock, his calm face unreadable, his steady eyes fixed on the scene. The officers walked closer, one raising a hand in a gesture of authority. Sir, we received a complaint. Your boat is docked illegally, you must remove it. The words hung heavy in the morning air, absurd yet spoken with full seriousness. Karen crossed her arms, her voice loud enough for all to hear. You see, we told you this would happen. You cannot just do as you please. Rules are rules and no one is above them. She looked back at the crowd for support, nodding sharply as though the neighbors' whispers were cheers for her cause. But the neighbors were not cheering, they were whispering in shock. Police for a boat? Is that even legal? Why are they wasting time on this? The man finally moved, taking one slow step toward the end of the dock, his boots pressing against the old wood. He looked at the officers with calm eyes, then at Karen, then at the boat gently rocking against the post. He said nothing, his silence louder than any protest. The officers shifted uncomfortably, not used to such stillness. One officer cleared his throat. Sir, failure to comply will result in fines, possible removal of property, and escalation. Karen smirked at his words. Yes, escalation. She repeated like a victory chant. She turned to the neighbors. He thinks he can break the rules and smile his way through. But today he will learn. Still the man did not respond. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the notice the HOA had given him days before, unfolded it, looked at it for a brief moment, then folded it back and placed it neatly into his pocket. The action was small, simple, yet it carried a weight that unsettled everyone watching. It was as if he was reminding them that their papers meant nothing to him. His calm face held no anger, no fear, only the faint trace of a smile. The kind of smile that made people uncomfortable. The kind of smile that said he knew something they didn't. The neighbors leaned closer, their whispers louder now. Why isn't he saying anything? Why isn't he fighting back? The silence stretched long and heavy, broken only by the soft splash of water against the boat. Karen grew impatient, her voice rising with frustration. Well, are you going to remove it or do we have to order these officers to do it for you? Her finger jabbed toward him like a weapon, but the man only turned his head slightly toward the lake, his eyes scanning the wide expanse of water. The sun's reflection glimmered across the surface, golden and endless. He seemed more interested in the beauty of the moment than the noise behind him. His calmness unnerved them. Even the officers looked at each other uncertain. This was not the reaction they expected. The crowd grew larger, cars pulled over. At the edge of the road, people stepping out to see what was happening. The weight of so many eyes pressed down on the dock, and still the man stood, unmoving, silent. His boat rocking gently as if mocking the chaos around it. finally, after what felt like an eternity. He set down his coffee cup on the railing, his hands steady. He looked at the officers, then at the crowd, then at Karen, whose face was red with anger, and though he said nothing, the faint smile on his lips carried a message no one could yet understand, a message that whispered of secrets hidden beneath the surface, of power waiting quietly to reveal itself. The police shifted again, unsure of what to do with a man who would not argue, would not obey, would not break. They had authority on paper, but his silence made their authority feel thin. The neighbors sensed it too, though they could not explain why. Deep down, every person watching felt the same strange truth, that this was not a man cornered. This was a man, waiting for the right moment to show them all why their threats and their rules would never touch him. The night after the police cars left the lake, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with noise. Every porch carried whispers, and every window had faces peeking out. Nobody could understand how a simple boat had brought flashing lights and officers to a quiet ranch community. Some neighbors thought the man would finally give up, others whispered that he would be dragged into court. But the man remained calm, sitting quietly on his porch as though nothing unusual had happened. His silence only fueled the rumors. By the next evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting in the community hall. The hall was packed, chairs lined in rows, the air thick with tension. The board members sat at the front with papers stacked high in front of them. Karen in the middle with her eyes sharp and her lips pressed into a thin smile. Her voice cut through the chatter like a knife when she called the meeting to order. "We are here to deal with the ongoing violation," she announced, lifting a sheet of paper in the air. "This concerns the boat tied at the ranch lake." The neighbors turned their heads to the back where the man sat. His face as calm as ever, his arms folded loosely. He did not look nervous. He did not even blink at the sound of her words. Karen slammed the paper down on the table for effect. "This boat is a direct violation of our community rules," she declared. "It disturbs the view, it lowers property values, it sets a bad example for others. And it cannot remain." Her voice rose higher with each accusation. The shorter woman beside her nodded quickly, adding that rules existed to protect everyone and one person could not simply decide to ignore them. "If we allow this today, tomorrow 10 boats will line the water and chaos will follow," she said, her hands trembling slightly but her words loud. The tall man leaned forward, his voice deep and full of authority. "We have already called the police once. We will do it again. We will fine him heavily. And if necessary, we will remove the boat ourselves." The crowd gasped softly. Some nodded in agreement. Others frowned nervously. The man sat still, his calm gaze sweeping across the board, then across the crowd. His silence thicker than words. Karen could not stand it. Her face flushed red as she leaned forward. "Speak," she demanded. "Do you think this is a joke? Do you think your smile will save you? You are breaking the very foundation of this community." Her voice cracked slightly as she shouted. The neighbors all turned toward him, waiting for his reply, waiting for him to shout back. But instead he leaned back slowly in his chair, his movements calm, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. "I hear your complaints." That was all he said. No defense, no anger, just a calm acknowledgement. His tone carried no fear, only quiet strength. The crowd shifted uneasily, some neighbors whispering that his calmness was stranger than anger. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "Don't twist this with your games," she snapped. "Either obey the rules or face the punishment." Still the man did not argue. He only tilted his head slightly, his eyes steady, his small smile returning. And in that moment the board members felt something they could not explain. A strange unease, as if they were not the ones in control of the meeting, as if the power they thought they held was already slipping quietly into his hands. The meeting ended with Karen shouting promises of fines and legal action. But when the neighbors left the hall, their whispers were no longer about the HOA's strength. They were about the man's silence, and how that silence felt more dangerous than any loud threat. 2 days after the heated HOA meeting, the man's house once again became the center of attention. The sun had barely climbed high when the sound of engines broke the calm of the ranch. Flashing red and blue lights appeared at the end of the gravel road. This time 3 police cars rolled in, their lights spinning across the water. Doors slammed. As officers stepped out, their hands resting firmly on their belts, behind them came the familiar figures of the HOA board. Karen at the front with her arms crossed and a look of victory painted across her face. Neighbors rushed from their homes again, the crowd forming quickly, whispers filling the air as they pointed toward the dock where the boat still sat tied neatly in its place. The officers walked forward, their boots heavy on the ground. The lead officer raised his voice. "Sir, we have received repeated complaints that you are trespassing on restricted property, that you are violating community rules and ignoring official warnings. You must remove this boat immediately." The words made the neighbors gasp. How could a man trespass on his own lake? Confusion spread through the crowd, but Karen quickly stepped forward to fill the silence. Her voice sharp and commanding. "He has ignored every notice. He has ignored the rules, and now he is in violation of the law." She pointed dramatically at the boat as though it were a crime scene. Her voice carried like a dagger across the water. The officers nodded stiffly, their eyes shifting from the HOA members to the silent man. He stood calmly on the edge of the dock, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. The officer held out a paper, an official warning stamped with bold letters. "Failure to comply will result in further enforcement." The crowd held its breath, waiting for him to shout, to argue, to finally break. But he only stepped forward slowly, took the paper from the officer's hand, glanced at it once, then folded it neatly and slipped it into his pocket just as he had done before. His calmness unsettled even the police. One officer shifted nervously, clearing his throat. "Sir, do you understand the seriousness of this?" Karen seized the moment, shouting, "Yes, he understands. He just thinks he can ignore us. He thinks he is above the law." Her voice cracked with anger, but her eyes glittered with triumph. The neighbors shifted uneasily. Some murmured that maybe the HOA was right. Others whispered that something about this still felt wrong. The man looked at the officers with steady eyes, his lips forming the faintest smile. He did not speak. He did not defend himself. His silence was louder than any words. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. They were used to shouting, arguing, resistance. But this calm silence was something different, something that made their authority feel weak. The crowd grew restless. Children pulled at their parents' sleeves, asking what would happen next. Karen raised her chin and shouted again. "Remove the boat now or face the consequences." Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced it louder. The man turned his gaze toward the lake. The water shimmered under the sun, wide and endless. He seemed more interested in its calm beauty than the chaos around him. His silence dragged on, making every second heavier. The officers finally stepped back, muttering that they would report the incident and escalate further if he failed to act. The HOA members followed them out, Karen throwing one last glare at the man, her frustration boiling that once again he had not reacted the way she wanted. The neighbors began to drift away, their whispers following them down the road. Some said the man was reckless, some said he was brave, but all agreed on one thing. There was something about him, something in his silence, something in his steady smile, that made it clear this was not the end. This was only the beginning of a fight none of them truly understood. By the next morning the neighborhood was no longer calm. Flyers began appearing on doors and mailboxes, bold letters printed in black ink declaring that the man was a threat to the community. The paper read, "Protect our neighborhood values, say no to unauthorized boats," and at the bottom in small but sharp print were the signatures of the HOA board members led by Karen. Children playing on the sidewalks picked up the papers and handed them to their parents. Some parents crumpled them angrily while others nodded with uncertain faces. Whispers spread faster than the wind. By afternoon the entire neighborhood was buzzing with rumors. Some said the man planned to turn the lake into a private business, charging people to use it. Others claimed he wanted to build a row of docks and flood the lake with outsiders. No one knew the truth, but the lies traveled like fire. Karen herself marched from door to door, her heels striking the pavement, her voice sharp as she warned neighbors, "If we do not stop him now, he will destroy everything we built." She leaned close to nervous families, saying that the police were already involved and the next step might be court. Her tone carried fear but also a desperate hunger to keep her power. Slowly people began to avoid the man. Those who once waved now turned away quickly. Children who used to smile at him were pulled aside by their parents. Whispers followed him every step, in the grocery store aisles, at the gas station, even when he stood quietly on his dock. The stares never stopped. The neighbors feared being seen with him, feared angering the HOA. Yet deep down many felt uneasy because they could not explain why a simple boat had drawn such fire. The man noticed everything, but he never reacted. Each morning he still carried his coffee to the dock, still placed his hand gently on the rope that held his boat, still smiled faintly at the lake as though it belonged more to him than anyone could understand. His silence became heavier each day. The calmness of his face made the gossip feel smaller, weaker, like noise against stone. But the HOA pushed harder. Karen called another gathering at the park. This time she spoke with louder fury. Neighbors gathered with folded arms, some curious, some nervous. Karen raised her voice for all to hear. "He is dangerous," she shouted. "He thinks he can break the rules. He thinks he can laugh at us. Today it is 1 boat. Tomorrow it will be 10. Do you want your lake filled with strangers? Do you want your home values destroyed?" Her words echoed across the park. Some neighbors clapped weakly, others muttered in doubt, but Karen smiled proudly, certain that fear would bind them to her side. What she did not see was the way eyes kept glancing toward the ranch lake, toward the silent figure who stood on his dock watching the sunset. The man who never shouted, never fought, never begged, yet somehow made them all uneasy, as if the real power was not in the flyers or the speeches but in his calm smile and the secrets hidden behind it. By nightfall the neighborhood felt divided, some fully against him, others quietly questioning the HOA. And in the middle of it all the man sat on his porch, the flyers scattered across his lawn by the wind, untouched, unread, as if their words meant nothing to him, and in truth they didn't, because he knew something the others didn't, something that would soon turn every whisper into silence. The sun had barely started to set when a knock echoed hard against the man's front door. It was not the soft knock of a neighbor but the heavy pounding of people who wanted to show power. The man opened it slowly and found Karen standing there with the 2 board members at her side and nearly a dozen neighbors gathered behind them. Their faces tense with curiosity and fear. Karen held a paper in her hand, the words "Final Notice" written across the top in bold red letters. She waved it like a weapon, her voice sharp and high as she announced, "We have been patient long enough. You have ignored every warning, every rule, and every law. This is your last chance. If your boat is not removed within 24 hours, we will tow it ourselves. We will fine you daily. And we will seek legal action until you are forced to obey." The neighbors shifted uneasily, some looking at Karen with doubt, others watching the man with wide eyes, waiting for him to explode, waiting for him to finally fight back. But he only leaned against the doorframe, his face calm, his eyes steady, his silence pressing heavier than Karen's words. Karen grew frustrated by his lack of fear. She stepped closer, her finger stabbing toward his chest. "Don't think your silence makes you strong," she hissed. "Rules are rules. You will learn that the hard way." Behind her the tall man from the board added firmly, "If you resist, we will not hesitate to involve the police again. This time they will not leave without action." The shorter woman chimed in too, whispering that the community would no longer tolerate his defiance. The man let them finish, let the words hang heavy in the air. Then slowly he stepped outside, his boots crunching against the gravel as he walked past Karen and the board. The crowd parted slightly, surprised by his calm movement. He walked toward the dock with steady steps, the boat waiting silently as if it too was part of the confrontation. He stopped at the edge, the golden light of the sunset reflecting across the water. The crowd followed, their murmurs growing louder. Karen raised the red notice in her hand again, shouting, "This is your last warning. Obey or be punished." But the man finally turned his head toward her, his voice low yet sharp enough for all to hear. "You have spent so much time shouting about rules, so much time waving papers, but you never stopped to ask who truly has the right to give orders here." The words made the crowd fall silent, a chill running through them. Karen blinked, confusion flashing across her face. She tried to laugh, but it sounded weak. "What do you mean?" she snapped, her voice unsteady. "You don't control anything here. The HOA controls everything." But the man only tilted his head, his faint smile returning. "You have been fighting for something that isn't yours." The sentence struck like a stone dropped in still water. Ripples of whispers spread through the neighbors. What does he mean? Isn't the lake ours? Isn't the marina the community's? Karen's face burned red as she shouted back, "Enough of your riddles. You think you can scare us with silence, but tomorrow that boat will be gone. Mark my words." She turned sharply, her heels striking the dock as she stormed off, the board members trailing behind her. But the neighbors lingered, their eyes locked on the man, their whispers hushed but filled with fear and curiosity, because in his calmness, in his quiet words, they felt something they could not explain, a power that was not written on the HOA papers but carved deeper than any rule. The man looked back at the lake, the water glowing in the dying light, and though he said nothing more, the crowd knew in their hearts that Karen's threats were not the end. They were only the beginning of a truth that would soon shake them all. That night the air in the neighborhood felt heavy, people could not sleep, lights flickered in windows long after midnight as families whispered about what the man had said on the dock. What did he mean when he claimed they were fighting for something that wasn't theirs? Confusion spread with fear, and by morning the whispers had become louder than ever. Karen walked door to door again trying to keep control, telling everyone not to listen to his tricks, calling him arrogant, saying he was bluffing. But even in her own eyes there was doubt, because his calm voice had carried a weight that her shouting could never match. The next evening Karen and the board appeared at his house once again. This time without police, this time without flyers, but with a crowd of neighbors pushing behind them, curiosity burning in their eyes. Karen shouted from the porch, "If you have something to say, then say it. If you think you can trick us, then prove it. We are not afraid of your games." The man stood silently for a long moment. Then without a word he opened the door wider and gestured for them to come inside. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but pride forced them forward, and the neighbors pressed close to the windows. Desperate not to miss a thing, he led them down the hallway of his ranch house, past walls lined with old photographs of the lake, framed maps, and shelves filled with heavy books. The smell of wood polish and age filled the air. At the end of the hall he pushed open the door to his study. A room dimly lit with a single lamp on the oak desk. The desk itself was heavy, the drawers locked with brass handles worn from years of use. Slowly he knelt, pulled a key from his pocket, and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it he lifted a thick leather folder bound with straps, its edges frayed but strong. He placed it on the desk with care. Karen rolled her eyes and scoffed loudly. What is this supposed to be? Some fishing license? But when he opened the folder the smirk froze on her face. Inside lay papers yellowed with age yet carefully preserved, stamped with official seals and signed by county officers decades ago. The man spread them out across the desk. One by one, the neighbors at the window gasped. The tall board member grabbed a page quickly, his eyes darting across the legal words. His face drained of color as he realized what he was holding. The document was a deed, not just for the ranch, not just for the dock, but for the entire body of water stretching beyond it. Ownership of the lake, water rights, shoreline access, every inch legally belonging to the man who now stood calmly before them. Karen snatched a paper with trembling hands, her voice cracking as she read aloud, "Ownership of Marina properties, and all adjoining water boundaries granted to the undersigned." She lowered the paper slowly, her eyes wide, her face pale, her lips struggling to form words. The shorter woman shook her head desperately, whispering, "This can't be real. This must be fake." But the stamps were real, the signatures undeniable, the pages heavy with authority that no HOA rule could erase. The neighbors outside pressed harder against the glass, their whispers now sharp with shock. "He owns the lake. He owns the marina. He owns it all." Realization spread like a storm. The man leaned against the desk, his arms folded loosely, his eyes calm as ever. "I told you," he said softly, "you fight for what you never had." The board members stood frozen. Their authority shattered in one moment. Karen's pride fought to hold on. She slammed the paper down and shouted, "This doesn't matter. We still have rules. The HOA still controls the neighborhood." But her voice wavered, thin and weak compared to the weight of the truth. The neighbors could see it, they could feel it. The battle had shifted. The man did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to argue. All he needed was the truth in those papers, truth that made the HOA's warnings nothing more than empty noise. He calmly gathered the documents again, sliding them back into the leather folder, then looked at them with eyes steady and sharp. "I never wanted a fight. I never wanted trouble. I only wanted peace. But you tried to take what was mine. Now you see who truly owns the water you stand beside." Silence filled the study, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside the crowd murmured louder, fear mixing with respect, and Karen realized with a sinking heart that her empire of rules had just collapsed, broken not by shouting but by a folder of papers and the quiet strength of the man she thought she could crush. The morning after the shocking reveal, the neighborhood no longer looked the same. Whispers started before sunrise. People stood in driveways with arms folded, Their faces pale with worry. News had spread like wildfire that the man not only owned his ranch lake but also held the rights to the marina. Every ripple of water, every dock, every boat was under his control. Neighbors who once believed Karen's every word now found themselves doubting her. Some even avoiding her entirely. When she marched down the street trying to rally support, people closed their doors or shook their heads. The power she once carried had drained from her voice, but Karen was not ready to give up. She stormed to the board office, slamming her hand on the table, shouting that they could not let him win. But the tall man and the shorter woman were silent, their faces pale. The truth had broken their confidence. By afternoon the man sat calmly on his porch, watching as groups of neighbors walked slowly past his house, their whispers no longer filled with suspicion but with fear. What if he shuts down the lake? What if he bans us from the marina? What if we lose everything? The fear grew heavier with each passing hour. Karen finally gathered the courage to confront him again. She marched to his house with her voice raised. "You think you can scare us with papers?" she shouted. "You think owning land makes you king? You cannot hold this over us." Her words echoed, but the neighbors around her did not cheer like before. Instead they looked down. Some stepped back, because deep inside they knew she was wrong and he was right. The man stood slowly, walking toward the dock where his boat swayed gently in the evening breeze. He placed his hand on the wooden post and then turned to face them, his voice calm and steady. "I could take it all from you," he said. "I could end your fishing, your swimming, your weekend parties, every right you think you have here, and none of you could stop me." His words cut deep. The crowd gasped, fear flashing in their eyes. Karen's face twisted. She wanted to shout again, but her throat tightened, because she knew he was telling the truth. But then his voice shifted, softer now. "I will not do that," he continued. "I never stopped anyone before. I never took anything from you. I only wanted peace, and I still want peace." The crowd exhaled as if a heavy stone had been lifted from their chests, relief spreading through their faces. Yet the respect in their eyes was clear. They now understood that their enjoyment of the lake, their weekends at the marina, their quiet moments by the water all existed only because of his choice. Not the HOA's power. Karen's pride shattered completely. Her fists clenched as she shouted, "You cannot just act like some savior." But her words fell flat. No one clapped. No one agreed. The people had turned. The HOA no longer stood tall. The neighbors saw the truth with their own eyes. The man owned the lake. The man owned the marina. And their peace depended on him. For the first time Karen felt small, her authority crumbling under the weight of silence and truth. The tables had turned. And everyone knew it. The man's calm smile was no longer confusing. It was terrifying, because it belonged to someone who held real power, power they could not challenge. And yet he chose mercy instead of revenge. That choice made him untouchable, and the days that followed the entire neighborhood felt like a different place. The once powerful HOA board no longer walked with their heads high. Their meetings grew smaller, their voices grew weaker, and the neighbors who once feared them now avoided them as if they were nothing but shadows. Karen, who had once stood proudly at the center of every gathering, now found herself ignored, her clipboard empty, her words falling flat whenever she tried to raise her voice. People no longer opened their doors when she knocked. They no longer clapped when she shouted about rules. Her pride was broken and her anger burned inside her, but she could not find anyone willing to listen. All because of the man who had stood calm and silent while she tried to destroy him. All because of the papers he revealed that shifted power completely. Meanwhile, the man's life did not change on the surface. He still woke up early, still carried his coffee to the dock, still placed his hand on the rope that tied his boat. But the way the neighbors looked at him had changed forever. When they passed, they no longer whispered insults or spread rumors. Instead, they nodded quickly or avoided eye contact altogether. Some even gave him cautious greetings, their voices nervous but filled with respect. They all knew now that their joy, their weekends at the lake, their summer days at the marina, were not protected by the HOA's rules but by the calm mercy of the man who truly owned it all. One evening, as the sun lowered across the horizon and painted the water gold, he sat on his dock again, the boat swaying gently beside him, the neighborhood around him quiet and tense. Children laughed in the distance as they played near the shore, their parents watching carefully, but no one dared to speak against him anymore. Karen tried one last time to gather a group. She stood on the corner shouting that rules still mattered, that the HOA could not simply be ignored. But the people walked away from her. one by one leaving her voice to echo in the empty air. She stood alone, her face pale, her anger useless. She had lost not because the man fought her but because he had shown the truth, and truth was stronger than her shouts. The man did not step off his dock to answer her. He did not need to. His silence was enough. The neighbors had already chosen to listen to him without him saying a word. They had seen the papers. They had felt the weight of his calm, and they knew where the real power rested. The HOA was finished. Their threats now only empty words. Their power reduced to nothing. The man leaned back, the cool evening breeze brushing his face. He watched the ripples on the water and allowed himself a small smile. He had taught them all a lesson without raising his voice, without lifting a hand. Sometimes true strength was not in shouting but in patience, not in threats but in silence, and not in rules but in truth. The final lesson for the neighborhood was clear: power does not always belong to the loudest voice or the ones who wave papers in the air. Sometimes it belongs quietly to the one who already owns everything they are trying to control. As the last light of the sun faded and the lake turned silver under the moon, the man stood, tied his boat more firmly, and walked back toward his home, leaving the neighbors to whisper among themselves, their fear mixed with respect, their lives forever changed by the man they had underestimated, and by the calm truth that had destroyed the HOA without a single fight.